Hello, welcome to Chef Richard's Kitchen. I'm Chef Richard Miller. Today we're going to make a seafood stew. This one happens to be uniquely American. It's called Cioppino, or Cioppino, as a lot of them call it. And although fish stew is nothing new. I mean, this probably goes back all the way, to Homer and, the Odyssey and Grecian times back then. So it's definitely not the first stew, but it is the first one, that kind of has the name and started with and kept the name. Cioppino actually does come from San Francisco. The way it started, and there's a couple of different trains of thought on how it originally got its name. And in this case, I actually believe in both. And it started out in the West Coast, San Francisco. The fishermen every night would bring their catch and they'd dock on Meigs Harbor. And Meigs Harbor out there, probably nobody knows it, anymore. They say where. And it didn't last long. It went defunct, but the location still goes. Today it's known as Fisherman's Wharf. And it was about a 1,200 foot pier that went out there. The fishing boats tied up to that, and all the fishermen brought in their catch. Now, often they would have their dinner there on the pier, and each of the fishermen would then chip in, or Cioppino, chip in to the stew. Another way that they chipped in was periodically some of these fishermen came back empty-handed. And in the spirit of the industry, most of the rest of the fishermen chipped in, and from what I understand is they chipped in fairly well, to these and just gave them part of their catch. The reason I think they were generous is because you never know. Tomorrow they may be the ones that come in, empty-handed. They're looking for a little bit from their fellow fishermen. Anyway, another take on the name comes from ciuppo, and that was an Italian fish stew. And since most of the fishermen were Italian Americans or Italian descent, that probably makes a lot of sense as well. So here's a case where I kind of believe both of them, and both of them kind of melded into a single dish. We now call it Cioppino, or as the Italians always called it, Cioppino. So let's get started. What we're going to do, the first thing we need to do to get started is we want to take our seafood. And this is mostly shellfish, not all of it, because we have some bay scallops, and we also have some, I'm using cod, but you can use any firm white fish. What you do is you take, and I'm using 18 of these little stone clams, and another 18 just regular mussels. And the first thing you want to do with them is you want to put them in cold water, and you want to let them set for half an hour. And what that does is it encourages them to purge the sand and the dirt that's inside them. And I look down, and I see some in there, so it really does work. So before you get too far along, you want to take and if you're not buying shelled and deveined shrimp already, you want to go ahead and shell and devein them. You want to go ahead and take and cut your white fish. And in this case, I'm just using cod. Just take and cut them up into about 1-inch chunks. For the crab, I'm just using Dungeness crab. You can use any kind of crab you want. You can use Jonah claws for all that goes. All right. And what I did before I started filming was I took these legs, put them on a chopping board, and kind of pressed a knife down there and broke the shells. Now, if you want, you could also take, the lobster, crushers and clam crushers, or crab crushers, and put them in, so your guests have something. But, this tends to break up the shell, and I like to do it just simply because, remember, you're thinking of your guests' convenience. So, all right, this is starting to heat up. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to put in a stick of butter here. Now, one thing you want to do is after you've cracked and crushed the shell in your crab, make sure you rinse it. The reason is, once again, you're thinking of your guests, and the last thing you want is your guest pulling crab shells out of their teeth. So make sure you rinse them off well. And then the other is just, simply bay scallops. And these are the scallops. You see bay scallops and sea scallops. Bay scallops are the smaller ones. Can you use sea scallops? Sure. But you kind of want to make sure they're bite-sized, so you probably chop them up. Might as well buy the bay scallops. They're cheaper. So, okay. Once our butter gets melted, I'm going to put in an onion, and I'm going to put in one fennel bulb that I've thinly sliced. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to saute these until they're nice and soft. One of the things I learned from Chef Paul Prudhomme is he was always great at talking about building a dish. And he would set it up so that while the dish cooked, he would have some of the smaller dices of potatoes in there. They would cook faster and they would form a thickener, for the rest of them. He built a dish. And we're going to do something very similar to that here. And we're going to take, and we're going to time it. And we're going to put in some of our fish before others because they cook at different temperatures. So there is an order that we're going to go through. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put on our clams and mussels. The next thing we're going to do is going to go ahead and put in our crab legs. Then we'll go ahead and we'll put in our scallops because they take just a little longer to cook. Then we'll put in our shrimp. Then we'll put in our white fish. And we'll just let it simmer another couple of minutes in there. That's after we have our broth all made. And then we're going to have Cioppino. So. All right, let me go ahead and I'm just going to let this cook for a couple of minutes. That fennel is going to take a little while to tenderize. So I'll be right back. All right, it's been about 10 minutes and things have softened up nicely. One of the ways you could tell that the fennel is soft enough is when you put them in, they're going to be in rings. You can dice them if you want. But if I put them in rings, and that way when I can take and just chop them with the wooden spatula here, and they easily separate, I know they're done. All right. Now, let's go ahead and we've got some herbs that we want to put in. And I've got about, a tablespoon and a half of just fresh basil. And probably about 2 or 3 teaspoons of chopped oregano. This is just stuff I'm pulling out of the garden. As well as about a half cup of parsley. Let's go ahead and saute these all together. I do want to put in a little salt. And my thyme wasn't ready, so I just have probably a half teaspoon of dried thyme. That'll work just fine. All right. Now it's time for about a clove of minced garlic. And you remember we put this in, and we've done this many times before. We kind of put this in at the end because we just want to saute garlic until it becomes fragrant. We don't want to run the risk of burning it. All right? Now that we have our herbs in there, now it's time for, I have 1.5 cups of dry white wine. And in this case, I'm just using Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm going to put in a few bay leaves. Normally I'd say a couple of them. I'm using an extra couple just simply because, you know, these have been around a while and they've lost a little bit of potency. All right, now I have a 15 or actually 14.5 ounce can of diced tomatoes and a 28 ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put this in, stir it, and I have just a little bit of red pepper flakes. Now I'm putting this in very, very, slowly, because a little of this goes a long, long way. And remember, you don't want to burn your tongue out of your guests. If they want more red pepper, they can always ask you, and you can always bring it. Very good. Obviously the flavors haven't all melded together yet. But what I'm doing is I'm going to bring this up to a boil, and then I'm going to turn it down to a simmer, and I'm just going to let it simmer for a while. I am going to put in 4 cups of seafood stock. If you can't find seafood stock, chicken stock will work just as well. Vegetable stock will work fine. We may have to put in an extra. We may have to put in an extra cup of seafood stock. Sometimes I've used 4, sometimes I've used 5. I've got an extra box here in case we need it. So we're just going to let this come up to boil. All right. It's been, probably about another 10 minutes or so. And the broth here is boiling nicely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and take this off of the actual induction wattage, and I'm going to put it down on temperature. And I'm just going to set it up to a medium-high simmer, and we're just going to let this go for 30-40 minutes, something like that, because we want all the flavors to meld in. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to start putting our seafood in. So hang on, don't go far, I'll be right back. All right, it's been 30 minutes, and let's take a taste and see how everything's coming along. Very good. I am going to put in just a little bit more salt. And a little bit of pepper. And by the way, I have fished out the bay leaves. I did that before I turned the camera back on. Much better. All right, now it's time for the seafood. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to raise the wattage on this, because when I put the seafood in, it's actually going to cool it down just a little bit. So, all right, let's go ahead and put our clams in. Once again, and mussel. Check and make sure that all of them are closed. I did go in and and before I start soaking these in water, I did go around and make sure that I de-bearded all the mussels. Okay, all of these are going ahead and all of those are closed, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in here, and we're going to boil them, 5-10 minutes, something like that, until they start opening. All right? Then, when they start opening, we can go ahead and start putting in our other seafood. Now remember, our crab is already cooked. They steam these, before you ever get them. So they're cooked, but it's going to take a while to get through the shell and to actually heat them up. So, let's give this a few minutes and we'll go from there. Oh, one last thing I wanted to say is, remember how I've told you to take, and I said at the beginning of this, to make sure that you soak your clams or any of your shellfish in some water to make sure it has time to purge the sand and dirt. I looked down there and I see sand and dirt down there. So one thing, this is certainly my recommendation, is don't skip this step. All right, we go in here and we look, and the clams have opened and the mussels have opened. And so now it's time, let's go ahead and put the crab. And we're not going to wait for that to open because there's nothing to open. We're just going to wait a few minutes because we want to make sure that it's heated all the way through. Then we're going to put in our scallops because they're going to take a little longer. And the cod and the shrimp, all we have to do is just cook them till they're cooked through. So. All right, it's been probably 5 minutes, so let's go ahead and I'm going to put in the scallops. And we're probably going to let them cook a couple, 3, maybe 4 minutes, something like that. We just want to make sure that they're just cooked and, until they're opaque through. All right, we just need probably another couple minutes and the scallops will be ready. But while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put our shrimp in. And we're just going to cook our shrimp until they're pink. And as you can see, it doesn't take long. And finally, I'm going to put our cod in. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this go ahead and simmer until the cod is cooked, and then it's going to be time to plate. So don't go far. I'll be right back. I promise. All right, I look at this. When the cod is cooked, the shrimp is cooked, the scallops are cooked. So now you know what time it is. It's time to plate. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to take my ladle and I'm going to make sure that I get a little of each in there. So I'm probably going to go ahead and use my tongs here. All right. And here we go. And here we have it. Here's Cioppino. Now, what do we serve with Cioppino? Well, what I always recommend is just a couple of pieces of good artisan bread. If this were in San Francisco, you know what they'd be serving? That'd be sourdough bread. And so if you want to do that here, that's great too. To garnish, can you put a little bit of the fennel fond on there? Sure. Can you put a little parsley? Sure. there is how I recommend you serve Cioppino. All right, now, one thing to do, and remember, I'm a great one to always say think of your guest first. The big thing is make sure before you send this out, you look at each one of the mussels in the clams. If there's one that hasn't opened, throw it away. All right, so here we go again. Last thing to do, yum, that's good. You will enjoy this. It takes a little longer than some of the rest of the dishes we've done, just simply because you've got so much prep work to do with it, and there's all that seafood in there. But it's well worth it. Give it a try, please. Let me know how it turns out. I'm always interested in knowing, how my viewers are doing. And again, if you have any troubles with it, let me know. Let's see if we can get it straightened out and figure out why. So, once again, thank you for joining me with this episode. Take care. God bless. Remember that cooking is always something fun. And we'll see you next episode. Bye for now.